Good evening, everyone. I'm Brian Trumbore with your nightly review for Monday, April 1st, opening day. The booth is full with visitors today. We have Mr. Met. Mike Piazza decided to stop by. He's been on his book tour. I don't think it's been selling that well. Yes, I am a Mets fan. And I've been focused on opening day, not the markets. It's bottom of the 8th at 4:02 Eastern Time with the Mets winning 11-2 over the Padres. Great start. And the Yankees are losing to the Red Sox 5-2 in the 7th. However, I am predicting, it's not going out on a limb, that the Washington Nationals will win the World Series in Davey Johnson's last year as manager. He did great things for the Mets in the 1980s. Us Mets fans, if the Mets can't win it, we'd love to see Davey win it. And they won 2-0 today in their opening game. Steven Strasburg, 7 shutout innings. Bryce Harper, 2 solo home runs. So good for Washington. Anyway, the Dow Jones, I used to play hooky when I was a kid. I didn't play hooky, I played sick. And Mom was always very nice to me. And in 1969, I was homesick, even though I was just fine watching the Mets. Okay, Dow Jones finished down about 6 points to 14,572. S&P 500 was down 7 to 1562. So both off of their all-time highs set last Thursday. Remember, we were closed on Friday. NASDAQ finished down 28 points. Shares in Apple fell about $14. It's been a very rough stretch after it looked like Apple had been recovering. Gold closed at $15.99, oil $96.90. Again, that's West Texas Intermediate, and the 10-year Treasury was at 1.84%. Tokyo was down 2%. Sloppy business sentiment reading. London, Paris, and Frankfurt were up fractionally. Today, the March ISM reading on manufacturing in the States came in at 51.3, down from 54.2 in February, and below expectations, and February construction spending was up 1.2%. In China, the Purchasing Managers Index for March came in at 50.9, an 11-month high, and up from 50.1 in February. A separate reading from HSBC had the PMI in China at 51.6. Chinese home prices picked up in March as buyers rushed to beat new government policies aimed at cracking down on speculation, particularly in Beijing and Shanghai. The cost of a new home in 100 major cities in China was up 3.9% year on year, again in March. China issued new rules in March to rein in prices, including a nationwide capital gains tax of 20% on profit owners. And as I mentioned, Beijing and Shanghai have issued new restrictions. Beijing, for example, is limiting single people to live locally to one home purchase if they don't now have a home, and increase the minimum down payment for all buyers of second homes. Shanghai said it would raise the down payment and mortgage rates for second home buyers. They've made similar moves in the past, and they actually have worked. Elsewhere in Asia, back to readings on manufacturing. They were pretty solid. Indonesia HSBC's PMI rose to 51.3 from 50.5 in February. Taiwan's rose to 51.2 from 50.2 in February. Vietnam manufacturing expanded at its fastest rate in nearly 2 years, 50.8 compared with 48.3. And Korea's PMI, according to HSBC, measured 52 compared with 50.9. But Japanese auto sales declined for the 7th straight month in March. Sales of passenger cars in Japan fell 16.7%. For the month, Honda Motor Company's sales plummeted 36%, Nissan's down 16%, and Toyota's down 16%. That's year over year. In Cyprus, the Bank of Cyprus, remember that's the largest and one of the two impacted by the bailout, said depositors with more than 100,000 euros could lose up to 60%, 60, of their savings as part of the EU IMF bailout. Cyprus Central Bank says 37.5% of holdings over 100,000 euros will become shares. Up to 22.5% will go into a fund attracting no interest and may be subject to further write-offs. The other 40% attracts interest, but this will not be paid unless the bank performs well. Bottom line is estimates are now coming in at 60 to 77% over the 100,000 insured euro limit. The fear is that once the unprecedented capital controls come off, the wealthiest will rush to move their deposits abroad. The larger than expected loss could have a devastating consequence for large depositors such as schools and universities. Cyprus fears for a lost generation, a mass exodus of the young, which has happened in previous cases in the Eurozone. In Ireland, emigration reached its highest levels in 25 years in 2012, while Iceland saw its worst bout of emigration for more than 100 years in 2009 after its banking crisis. Youth unemployment in Cyprus is already about 30%. One chief executive told the Financial Times, "The younger generation does not have much hope in Cyprus. My son is about to finish his studies in England and was going to come back, but he has postponed it this week until I don't know when." In a poll taken recently, one Cypriot television station asked viewers whether the country should become further integrated into the EU or lean towards Russia instead. Over 2/3 of respondents chose Russia. One bartender in the resort town of Limassol said people hate Angela Merkel. Few blamed the country's big foreign depositors, however. Said this fella, "The Russians have the right to react the way they have. You can't have your millions invested in a bank and then simply taken away from you. It doesn't matter how they made their money, money laundering or whatever, it is the Russians who are keeping our economy going." In Moscow, the Kremlin's anger has simmered because the agreement between the EU and Cyprus places the burden of the bailout on the biggest depositors of just the two lenders, Laiki and Bank of Cyprus, instead of all of the Cypriot banks. One Russian businessman said he did receive a call on Thursday about the capital controls from Cypriots he did not wish to identify, offering to help him move what he implied was more than €1 million, where these people would have helped him move it out of the country. But he said there was a catch. They said I had to pay €200,000 up front. I refused. In Italy, President Giorgio Napolitano, remember he's 87 years old, he's highly respected, but his term ends in May. It's up to him to try and form a government or to appoint one. And as of now, it was supposed to take place over the weekend, and I don't think it did. If no one succeeds in gathering support to form a government, fresh elections are definitely in the offing. According to a new poll published on Friday, Silvio Berlusconi's conservative bloc would get the highest percentage of a new vote, 32%. Pierluigi Bersani would get 30%, and the five-star movement of the unfunny comedian Beppe Grillo would receive 25%. So unless Grillo decided to enter a coalition, or Berlusconi and Bersani, you'd have another hung parliament. In North Korea, their parliament endorsed plans to give nuclear weapons greater prominence in the country's defenses. That came a day after the ruling Workers' Party called nuclear forces to be expanded and beefed up qualitatively and quantitatively. Kim Jong-un was quoted as saying, "The enemies are using both blackmail, telling us that we cannot achieve economic development unless we give up nuclear weapons, and appeasement, saying that they will help us live well if we choose a different path." But he said his country must expand its nuclear arsenal. However, in what some say is an encouraging sign, the commies also announced they had appointed a new premier, Pak Pong-yu. He was sacked from the same post in 2007. What's interesting is he's known as an economic reformer, or what passes for reform in North Korea. In Seoul, South Korean President Park Geun-hye told her military to retaliate strongly to any North Korean provocation. If there is any provocation against South Korea and its people, there should be a strong response in initial combat without any political considerations, Ms. Park told the military. Editorial, Wall Street Journal. As the Mets wrapped it up, 11-2 it would seem. Back to North Korea. Editorial, Wall Street Journal. North Korea watchers generally think Kim's threats are part of an effort to consolidate his domestic power and extract Western aid in the bargain. But the problem with acting crazy as a diplomatic strategy is that it doesn't rule out the possibility that Kim is crazy. Kim might even believe a show of bloody force will get him more respect, and there's always a risk that one of Kim's minions might get too eager to please the boss. When even Russia's foreign minister warns that events in Korea could get out of control, the risk is real. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said more than 6,000 people were killed in Syria just last month in March. Now their figure for the war is 62,500. Remember, the UN has said over 70,000. However, an official with the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said the 62,500 number he guessed only reflected about half of the actual dead. And I've followed this group, and they are extremely conservative, and they wait for fighters on both sides to report. And of course, both sides they lowball the numbers because they don't want morale to suffer. And a very tragic note, last Wednesday, it was just announced today, Monday, that an Afghan teenager fatally stabbed an American soldier from behind in the neck. We lost 14 American soldiers in Afghanistan in March after losing only one in February. So keep the men and women of our armed forces in your thoughts and prayers all the time. I'll be back with you tomorrow, Tuesday. Take care.